Welcome back to the Muscle Intelligence Podcast, 28 ways to maximize your muscle. Ladies and gents, if you don't know who I am, Ben Pakulski, the host of this podcast. I once stood on the Mr. Olympia stage. In fact, I twice stood on the Mr. Olympia stage. I started off this bodybuilding journey as an obese little kid from Toronto who really didn't know much about anything. And all I knew was I set a standard for myself that I wouldn't stop. I always say I was too stupid to know I shouldn't be successful. When I went to the Mr. Olympia in 1998 and watched these giant men, short, but giant, they look like giants up on stage, I knew that's what I wanted to do. And by setting that standard for myself, and luckily enough for me, having probably a really big deficiency to start with, I didn't have what I didn't think I had at the time was great genetics. I certainly didn't know anything about muscle building. Didn't have any good mentors or leaders early on in my career. But what I did have was a really high level of expectations for myself. I just wouldn't stop until I got where I wanted to go. I refused to stop. And so along the way, I learned a lot of lessons, some easy, some hard, some useful, some painful. And along the way, I learned that muscle building is incredibly simple, yet most people, like on the order of almost all, have no idea what the hell they're doing. They don't know how to think about muscle building. They certainly don't know how to do it. And I don't want to, again, I hate saying that to sound derogatory or like I'm putting people down, or it's not the reality. It's just like there's a really big opportunity to understand how to go levels deeper into truly thinking differently about muscle and then applying that thinking to maximizing your time. Listen, I don't care if you want to be 320 pounds at 5% body fat, or if you want to be 5 pounds bigger than you are now. In the current world we live in, the current landscape of the world, is everybody's recognizing the value of muscle. And so if you're stepping in the gym for 5 minutes or 5 hours, you want to make the most of every single rep. No matter who you are, if you're 12 years old or if you're 100 years old, you're trying to make the most of your time. So there's some worldwide principles or some global principles that you should probably understand, that if you're doing this stuff for 30 years at a really high level, I could probably simplify for you to make your journey more effective, more efficient, and ultimately more enjoyable. Because I think a lot of people stop wanting to train because they feel disempowered. Like, I can't build muscle. Like, well, no, you can. And, not everyone can build the same amount of muscle, certainly, and not everyone certainly can build huge amounts of muscle to stay on stage at the Mr. Olympia, but I'm sure you probably don't want to. So without further ado from me and more preamble, let's get into some really important things. Now, is this list exhaustive? I'm not sure, but I'll tell you, there's probably, of these 28 things, there's probably 3, maybe 5, maybe even 20. They're going to be like, I never thought of that before. And if you simply take 1 or 2 of these things and promise me you'll apply them today, you can be exponentially more effective. I'm going to do my best to make this impactful, make this valuable, and certainly not make it something that requires you to review every day, but you may want to end up listening back twice. So the first one that I think many people miss, not because they can't, but because it sort of diverges away from what we learn as young people. So when we learn as young people, we learn that putting the goal or putting the ball in the net or the puck in the net or getting across the goal line is the objective. That's an external focus. And that's really important. Like, score goals, go accomplish external thing. Great. What generally most people miss is the goal of training in the gym is not to lift the weight. The goal of training in the gym when it comes to muscle building is to challenge the muscle. And I think you guys have heard me say this before if you've been part of this community for any duration of time, but I think that's just missed. And if you just shift away from the external goal, which is the egocentric goal of I need to put this much weight in the bar, lift it this many times, which is great. CrossFit, powerlifting, awesome. If your goal is to build muscle, stop thinking about the weight in the bar and thinking about challenging muscles, because muscles don't know the weight on the bar. Muscles know tension or torque. And if you take an internal view of what's happening inside of your body, you will completely empower yourself to recognize that you can challenge muscles and therefore you can build muscles. And so what I think about when I'm in the gym is if I were to remove all of my skin and just think about the muscle itself, and imagine each muscle like an elastic band that literally is moving bones. Well, now that creates this perspective shift of like, I'm just trying to find both ends of the muscle and just allow this muscle to actually generate tension and torque. That's helpful. So the lesson here is challenging muscles don't lift weight. Number 2, muscle contraction should create motion, not the other way around. Now, if we're trying to be an athlete, this is actually flips. So there's 2 ways that the central nervous system creates motion. What's called top down and bottom up. Top down is what we're talking about when it comes to muscle building. It basically means my brain tells my muscles to contract. The muscle contraction creates motion. And so it's like, hey, pecs, I need you to contract to pull my arm across my body. Or hey, biceps, I need you to contract to pull my forearm to my upper arm. Great. That's brain tell muscle contract. Muscles create movement. Now, the opposite of that is if someone throws me a ball and I catch it, that's an instinctive reflexive motion. That's bottom up. So that means, my nervous system is telling where my brain is in space. Those are 2 different types of muscle contractions. If I'm trying to train for muscle building, I want my muscles to create movement. So like, hey, contract the muscle and allow the contraction to create motion. That's actually our point number 2. Point number 3, an extension of point number 1, is create an internal focus. Now, I know a lot of science people will tell you an external focus is more effective. They're wrong. And the reason they're wrong is because they're measuring or they're looking at research that says that are measuring outcomes. And if we're measuring outcomes specific to like, well, if you get more reps, you're going to get more muscle, which is not true. So if you look at a research study and it says, well, if I take an external focus, I actually get more reps, they're right. Short term, that's correct. So if my focus is I want to bench press 225 pounds the most number of times, taking an internal focus will absolutely decrease your output in this session, I believe. Taking an external focus will increase your output. So if your form is already perfect, then taking an external focus can help. If your form is not yet perfect, taking an internal focus will absolutely help you long term. So there's nuance in that. So what I would say is if you're someone who's learning to train or on 95% of your exercise, 95% of your sets, an internal focus will increase your effectiveness as far as challenging muscles. If for those top sets, those peak sets, those max 1RM, 3RM, 5RM sets, you want to create an external focus, meaning like I'm going to try to push this bar off my chest, that could be helpful to maximizing central motor command, brain, tell, muscle, contract. Number 4, tension is the key to growth, not load. So while load is very correlated with tension, load is not one-to-one correlated with tension, meaning if I increase the weight, but I change the proximity of that weight to my body, unfortunately, you're going to have less tension. Tension can be impacted by a lot of things. This is point number 5. Tension can be impacted by skill, stability, distance from the joint, direction of applied force, load, and there's probably other ones. Pay attention to all of them. Speed is another one. Number 6, this one's a little bit more like rubber meets the road, like pay attention to the tension. So I'll give you an example. If I'm doing a deadlift and I'm just thinking about lifting the bar off the ground, if your mechanics are perfect and your skill is great, you're fine. But if you're someone who's learning or you're not really 100% on the exercise yet, you're going to hurt yourself because you're going to end up lifting with the strongest muscles and never developing things equally. The body will always default to a path of least resistance, meaning it's going to do the least amount of work possible. And what does that mean? It's going to find the most mechanically efficient and the biggest muscles to move it. Now, is that useful? Maybe. What if I want to develop my weak body parts? Well, then doing that path of least resistance thing is not an advantage. So someone who's going to be an intentional lifter, an intelligent lifter, is going to move their body into a position that ultimately allows the muscle to be challenged that they want to challenge. Here's an example. I watched this wonderful little lady at the gym yesterday training her glutes. And during that glute session, she was in there for about 90 minutes, not a glute muscle was contracted in that 90 minutes. And I'm watching, I'm like, God, I could help you so much because she's doing the exercises, but their glutes aren't doing the work. And you're like, they're obviously doing something. I'm being a little hyperbolic, but not much. And we're like, So she just stopped. She was lifting relatively heavy weights, but her lower back was contracting, her quads were contracting, her hamstrings were contracting, and she had pancake ass. And you're like, gosh, if you just took a minute to stop and pay attention to the tension, create an internal focus, make sure your glutes are contracting from the lengthened position all the way to the short position, depending on the exercise, you could change so much. And she would probably have to take 2 to 3 months of what we call a foundational phase, learning how to move, rewriting movement patterns, and then everything changes. There's not a body part you can't build. You just need to learn to rewrite the movement patterns. And most people don't do that. Foundational phase 101. Number 7, tension and burn are not the same thing. So you get people who do like sets of 20, and like, oh, my legs are really burning. Those aren't the same thing. So just because your legs are burning doesn't necessarily mean you're maximizing tension. There may be some tension going through the muscle, but it doesn't mean you're maximizing tension. Number 8, maximum tension over time, over potentially variable time. So first variable there is I have to maximize tension. And that's not a given. So maximizing tension is about more than just the weight on the bar. There's distance, there's moment arm, there's direction of applied force. There's a lot of stuff. And if you don't understand how to maximize tension, start there. Number 9, become present. Why? Because when you're mindless, your body is going to do less. You're going to cheat. Your body is designed to cheat. Your body is designed to take you through path of least resistance. You don't want to do that. You must become present to pay attention to the tension. Coming back to the points. What do you become present in? There's a few things here. Posture, breathing, what muscles are contracting, what joints are moving. That's a super important one. If you actually watch a person do an exercise, let's say we do a pull down and you're like, hey, the bicep or the elbow joint is moving more than the shoulder joint. The shoulder joint's not doing most of the work. Number 10, tension is dependent on skill. Some people naturally put tension through muscles because they have great mechanics and they have great lever arms, like moment arms or muscular moment arms. Some people have really bad ones, but doesn't mean you can't build muscle. You just have to learn to direct the tension. So practice the skill, master the skill before you can maximize tension. Number 11, I've said this already, but your body will always follow the path of least resistance. So if you want to change how well you build a muscle, you must change how well you move through a path of motion. Number 12, generally speaking, skill must precede hard work. Hard work misdirected is not going to change the outcome. So some people, these are the guys we see on Instagram, to be honest, it's me, do things really well, naturally. And some people don't. And if you're not one, you got to change it. So there's only one reason why I believe body parts will be weak. So if you have strong body parts and weak body parts, there's one reason why genetically body parts will be weak. What is it? I've said it a million times on this podcast. Short muscle bellies. If you have long tendons and short muscle bellies, you will never develop that muscle maximally. If you have normal size muscle bellies, then you're just not directing tension well. Number 13, in the beginning, aim for perfect practice. And in beginning can mean in the beginning of your journey. It can also mean in the beginning of your workout. So perfect practice to rewire the brain to move more effectively is important. 14, 4 to 6 weeks, twice a year in what we call a foundational primer phase to relearn movement patterns. Literally, I still do this after 30 years of training. I still do a primer phase at least once a year, generally twice. And those will always precede my maximum muscle building phases. So if I want to go into a phase where I know that I want to build maximum muscle, here's what you must do. During the phase of maximum muscle building, there shouldn't be any learning going on. There shouldn't be like, oh, I'm going to like go really slow and be really focused on contraction. No. If you're wanting to build maximum muscle, you got to get your balls out of your purse and work hard. So what does that mean? I don't want to be spending time like with the pink dumbbells, mastering movements. That has to happen before I go into a muscle building phase. So it's super important to recognize like muscle building phases they're about output. Like I got to go hard. I don't want to go into the gym and waste time. Like I'm going to learn how to do this new movement like that. That has to happen months in advance. So going through intentional phases of foundational priming, like relearning movement patterns is essential, but it's also separate. So it shouldn't be in a strength phase. You know, it can happen before a workout, fine, or after a workout, that's fine. But generally we do distinct phases of anywhere between 4 and 12 weeks, depending where you are, to learn movement patterns, maximize movement patterns. And that's an ascending process, which means just because I can squat with a 45-pound bar doesn't mean I can squat with 135, doesn't mean I can squat with 225. I have to ascend and get better. Number 15, you must qualify before you quantify. What does that mean? The quality must precede the quantity, which is sort of what I'm saying in a number of these points. But like one of the challenges that people have is they try to count reps and sets when all of them are different. That doesn't work. Number 16, improve stability and strength will equal growth. So if I can scale stability, my ability to be stable, I can drive more tension. If I can drive more tension, I can drive more growth. So stability precedes growth. So if you're finding yourself unstable, you're not going to grow. So practice stability. How do we do that? Time. So if you've ever heard my three, which is probably another one of these points, one of my three means of progression, it's time, distance, and load. Not necessarily in that order, but time. So just like spend time in a position, just stay there for a while, like slow down. Time is probably the most underutilized variable in exercise. Here's a good story. I was in Switzerland 4 weeks ago, and I hired a guy who's the number one trainer in Switzerland to put me through an hour workout. Probably the hardest workout I've had in the last, 8 years. This guy annihilated me, which, Marco, you're awesome. And he didn't challenge weight. He didn't slap a whole bunch of weight on the bar and start yelling at me. The guy barely made any noise. A little bit. He was motivational for sure. But he challenged time. And, I know this stuff, but goodness, did he really exploit my lack of training in this time variable. We started off with leg extensions with a 2-minute hold at the top with the whole stack. I was like, is this guy crazy? And I'll tell you what, by the end of that set, I was annihilated. I didn't even do one full rep. I digress. Number 17, stability has 3 primary hubs that you should consider. So you need stability at the spine. We need stability at the scapula, shoulder blade. We need stability at the pelvis. So stability also has a prerequisite of mobility, right? I need to be able to get into position and stabilize it there. So stability and mobility are inextricably linked. And if you can't stabilize in a position, chances are you have some version of weakness. And if you can't get into a position, you also have some version of weakness. So look for those as laying the indicators of weakness. The next point is mobility matters. Without mobility, you can't get into a position. Again, this lady who was pancake butt that I was talking about yesterday, the reason she wasn't training her glutes is because you could see that she couldn't get into the right position. So she didn't have the hip mobility, whether that be extension, flexion, or internal rotation, to get into a position where she could fully lengthen her glute. So if she can't fully lengthen the glute, she can't train it from that position. She can't train it from that position. She can't build it. So if you're someone listening and you want to build a muscle, you got to get to the fully lengthened position. A really good example of this is guys who want to train their pecs, but literally can't get into a position to fully lengthen their pecs. Well, it's because you're weak. Stop trying to build your pecs. Strengthen the weakness, and you'll overcome your pec deficiencies. That nicely segues into point 19. Spend time in positions that are weak or lack mobility. And if you lack mobility, it's because you're weak. So if I want to improve my pec, for example, I need to be able to externally rotate my shoulder, retract my shoulder blade, and hold it there. If you can't get it there because you're internally rotated or upwardly rotated to the shoulder, you're never going to build your pecs. Number 20, challenge your muscle at every inch of every rep. You could I like to even use millimeter, like challenge your muscle at every millimeter of every rep. And that really requires nuance. And most people simply don't train with that level of nuance. And I think it's important, not just for muscle building, but also to be an athlete when you're 80, right? So why do I want to be an athlete when I'm 80? Well, what does that mean? That means if I ever don't go into a position and challenge it, and if I ever get there by accident, I'm likely to hurt myself. So I want to train every position that I am ever going to get into on purpose. So it means slowing down and training it there. Number 21, select exercises that fit your body. We've talked about this one ad nauseum. Number 22, your thoughts matter. One of the things that people don't recognize about exercise is that exercise can rewrite a lot of different emotional patterns, or it can rewrite a lot of different confidence patterns or personality patterns. I'll give you an example. I can't. I don't want to. I'm afraid. Versus bring it on. I got this. I know I can do this. When you're in this heightened arousal state, this heightened state of exercise, you're very suggestive. So if you're like, I can't do it, I'm afraid, or I don't know that I can do it, I don't believe in myself, that's going to become wired into your nervous system and wired into your personality. Sounds far-fetched, but practice. If you want to become more confident, if you want to start believing in yourself, wire it into your training. Literally wire it into your belief system around exercise and lifting, and it will absolutely carry into your life. I've done podcasts on this in the past. Number 23, maintain tension during an exercise. Pausing is only useful if you're under tension. So what does that mean? Top of a bench press, no tension. Top of a deadlift, no tension. Top of a squat, no tension. So don't lock out. Don't throw your hips forward if your goal is muscle building. Putting yourself into a position that doesn't have tension doesn't contribute to your cause positively. Number 24, we talked about this a little bit already, but I want you to look for the types of progress that exist outside of just putting more weight in the bar. So what are those? Time, distance, load, half reps, quarter reps. Look for ways that don't require you putting more weight on the bar to challenge the muscle. And that's even aligning the direction of force. Sometimes the people don't understand, like a dumbbell only exerts force down. So if I can learn how to align my body under that or to oppose that more effectively, I can actually get more out of what I'm already doing. Number 26, I mentioned this briefly, but pay attention to what is moving. If it's moving, it's working. And so the best example is if I want to train my glutes on a deadlift, I have to pay attention to my hip joint and how much it's opening and how much it's closing. That's important. So if the hip joint is going through its full excursion, that's all the glute can do. Full flexion, full extension of the hip. If it's not going full excursion, you're missing an opportunity. So look for your exercise selection and your rep execution to go, is this muscle actually going through its full excursion? What does that mean? Full lengthening, full shortening of this muscle. So think about what the muscle is, what it does, and am I actually challenging it completely? Number 27, the objective of a warm-up is not to get warm. The objective of a warm-up is to tell your brain to do more work. What does that mean? So if I live in Florida, I spend a lot of time in Florida. If it's 100 degrees outside and I walk into the gym, am I ready to squat 600 pounds? No, I'm not ready because I'm hot. I'm ready because my brain, this computer that lives between my ears, tells my nervous system through this wiring to fire up central motor command, right? So we're saying, hey, muscles, I want everybody to warm up and get ready to go. When you're walking or you're sitting, your body is doing as little as it possibly can, right? So this is like literally down regulating all muscle contraction. Otherwise, you'd be tired all the time. So your body's doing as little as it possibly can. And your job with a warm-up is to maximize central motor command. So we want to maximize central motor command and train the body to move in sequence. This is called intermuscular coordination, meaning like bicep, front delt, pec, front delt. Like we need different muscles to coordinate between muscles. So we have intramuscular coordination and intermuscular coordination. So intra is all muscles within one muscle contracting, and intra is between muscles coordinating movement patterns. And number 28, this one's going to punch some people in the gut. Hard work is one of the biggest misconceptions in all of exercise. Why? Hard work isn't measured by the number of reps or weight on the bar. It's measured by outputs. So you're measuring inputs and not outputs. And outputs, in my mind, hard work means, well, if just because I'm lifting more weight, does that mean I'm working harder? No. What if I'm throwing it? What if I'm launching it? Doesn't mean I'm working harder. Hard work in my mind should be measured by the outputs. Like how much result am I actually getting? Leverage, ladies and gentlemen, is the true measure of hard work. And that's a wrap. Hopefully that was helpful. Go back, review, listen to it again. If there's an infinite number of things we could tell you, but hopefully you got a couple out there that you're like, oh, that's interesting. My goal here at Muscle Intelligence is to help you have the most effective workouts, not because I care if you're jacked and huge, but because I care if you're wasting your time and not being effective. So learn to rewrite your movement patterns, challenge the way you think about exercise, and ultimately then make the most of every single rep, every single set, and ultimately every single workout to the best of your ability. Why? Because your time matters. Not to spend 2 hours in the gym. Maybe you want to, go for it. If you don't, the goal is to make every single rep as maximally challenging as possible. Have an amazing day. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, go ahead and do that right now. Turn on notifications and don't forget to share this podcast with at least one person you know and love. And leave us up to a 5-star review. If you have any questions, go ahead and comment below. I'd love to hear from you. If there's specific topics you want us to chat on, if there's something that I say you don't agree with, I want to hear about that too. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to support you to be your best. Have an amazing day. See you next time.